Part 35. The Original Vampire. Author, Lugo Busrud. Chapter 344. Is the god dead? Colin's eyes widened, and his heart was filled with turmoil. Of course he knew what these words meant in this extraordinary world, and he finally understood why the Black Emperor had to die. Even after his death, all records about him were deliberately destroyed, as if someone was desperately trying to completely erase his existence from history. It turned out that it was because of such a rebellious statement. If the Church allows the Black Emperor's words to spread widely in the glorious empire, you can imagine what a blow it will have to the human belief system. Therefore, the Judge Duke Saint Zion appeared. Colin couldn't help but put his right hand on the blade of judgment hanging on his waist, feeling mixed feelings in his heart. The period of history that confused him at first was finally unveiled. So, is the Lord of Glory really dead? Colin couldn't help but ask. Ajani shook her head and said, I don't know, no one knows. This is indeed true. How can mortals speculate on the life and death of gods? It's just that the power of faith is not collected. This does not mean that the Lord of Glory is really dead. Perhaps, he just doesn't need the power of faith anymore. Of course, this speculation seems to be more likely to cause panic. The Lord of Glory's protection of mankind is actually obtained by mankind's service with the power of faith. If he no longer needs the power of faith, does that mean that he no longer needs humans and no longer protects humans? In any case, once believers learn the secrets beneath the Church, the foundation of the Radiant Church's existence will be shaken. There should be many people who know the secret, right? Colin asked again. Yes, all high-ranking priests above the bishop know the secret. In addition, the core figures of the 5 major paladin families also know it. The paladin family knows the secret because of the Black Emperor, right? Yes, Ajani nodded. Moreover, the reason why he was killed was because he summoned the 5 dukes and wanted to make the secret public. Colin sighed, and felt that the Black Emperor did not die unjustly. This kind of behavior not only undermines the foundation of the Church, but also damages the fundamental interests of the nobility. You must know that the Radiant Church and the imperial nobles are interdependent. Although they are currently fighting for power and profit, both sides have a tacit understanding to control the intensity of the struggle within a certain range so that they will not really get into trouble. The situation is beyond my control. After all, if the Church really collapses, who will baptize the nobles? How can a knight be born without being baptized? Without knights, how could the nobles rule the empire? Why should we fight against the alien races that are eyeing us from all directions? Therefore, even if the nobles learn this secret, they will never make it public. Therefore, even if the royal family has broken with the Church, it will never adopt such a lose-lose method. Except for the Black Emperor, who didn't know what to think. So, you are telling me the secret now because I have become the core figure of the Saint Hilda family in your eyes? Ajani nodded. Confirmed Colin's judgment. All the core figures of the 5 Holy Knight families know the secret, and I will also inform the Duke of the North. But then, she changed the topic and said, however, I will tell you the secret, there is another reason. Colin's eyes narrowed, knowing that this should be the real purpose of Ajani coming here, and he said, what reason? Ajani's eyes moved, and her whole body exuded a holy brilliance. But what she said was blasphemous. I want to make this secret public. What? Colin thought he heard wrongly and looked at Ajani in surprise. Ajani's eyes were firm, and she repeated what she just said. Are you crazy? Colin couldn't help but exclaim. Of course, Colin's shock was not due to his devout faith and reverence for the Lord of Glory, but because he could not understand Ajani's motives for doing this. As the Archbishop of the North, the Church of Radiance is Ajani's foundation. What good will it do to her if she makes the secret public and triggers a crisis of faith? Not to mention the fatal disaster that would definitely result from doing so. The last person who wanted to do this, the Emperor of the Empire, still met a miserable end. Does Ajani think she can be spared? As long as she dares to do this, she will definitely become the enemy of the entire glorious empire, and both the church and the nobility will desperately want to kill her. Why are you doing this? Colin asked in a deep voice. Because our Lord's followers have the right to know the truth, Ajani said calmly, giving a reason that even Colin didn't know how to evaluate. Seeing Colin's doubtful face, Ajani's expression remained unchanged and she explained. No matter what the reason is why my Lord no longer receives the power of faith, neither the church nor the nobles have the right to hide this truth. However, faith should not build on deception. I understand that they are all worried that this truth will cause panic and even a crisis of faith, but if some people's faith is shaken by this, then they are not worthy of becoming believers in our Lord. What's more, isn't this a test from our Lord? If this is the case, then our current response must be extremely disappointing to him. Listening to Ajani's righteous explanation, Colin didn't know what to say for a moment. He didn't know whether the northern archbishop was really so pious and couldn't tolerate his faith being blasphemed, or whether he just found a high-sounding one. An excuse to cover up her real ulterior purpose. Colin narrowed his eyes and his tone became a little cold. So, Your Excellency the Archbishop, why do you think I will support your idea, as a believer of our Lord, a knight in the north, and a viscount of the empire, I should stop you from doing such a stupid thing, right? Because, I believe in the guidance of the holy light. Ajani stared into Colin's eyes and gave an answer that left him speechless. Guidance of the holy light? Yes, your affinity for the holy light is something I have never seen before. I believe that this is the guidance of our Lord. A pious knight like you will never tolerate the church to continue to deceive the believers of our Lord like this. Colin was silent. He remembered that Ajani had said such words before in Winter City, and that Pope Gregory also said similar words to Colin when he was in Dragon City. Could it be that he really was destined? Of course, such illusory things obviously cannot win Colin's trust. Sometimes, white lies are more precious than the cruel truth, Colin said expressionlessly. He didn't want to be an ally of this crazy northern archbishop. What the other party wanted to do, in Colin's opinion, was almost seek death. Good intentions, a sneer appeared on Ajani's pretty face. So the manipulation at the Duke's christening ceremony was also out of goodwill. Kellen's eyes shrank, but he was not too surprised. Ajani said that she had met Vera on the way to Swan City before. With her eyes as an archbishop, she could see what the Pope did to Vera. His hands and feet were not unusual. Seeing Colin's expression change, Ajani felt happy and quickly continued to encourage him. In fact, the top leaders of the church have long been corrupted, and they have long forgotten their original intention and mission. Although many people tried their best to slander the Black Emperor and tried every means to erase his traces, in fact, they had been affected by his arrogance and vaguely felt that the Lord of Glory was really gone, at least he had cut off contact with this world. When there were no more scrutinizing eyes above their heads, they began to become unscrupulous. The originally pure faith has long been corrupted and tainted, and the struggle for power has become their only goal and pursuit. They say they are doing it for the Lord of Glory, but in fact, they are just doing it for their own interests and status. Viscount Angelet, do you think such a church is really suitable to continue to dominate the human spiritual world? Colin stared into Ajani's eyes, and somehow, he suddenly thought of another woman. Queen Midla. The original vampire. Author, Lugo Busroot. Chapter 346. Colin suddenly thought, could Archbishop Ajani have any connection with the royal family? So, seemingly inadvertently, he raised his hands to his chest, palms facing inward, and his fingers intertwined to form a lotus-like mudra. Then, he carefully observed Ajani's reaction. However, Colin was disappointed. After Ajani saw this handprint, she just looked confused and didn't show any other expression. This handprint was shown to him by Queen Midla after she formed an alliance with Colin. She also said that seeing this handprint means she is someone she can trust. But obviously, Ajani is not an ally of the royal family. Colin immediately put away his fingerprints, clasped his hands on his chest, and said with a smile, "I think you should go to the royal family, they are more interested in the Pope's dirty information." Ajani shook her head and said, "Master Viscount, you are wrong. The royal family is fully aware of the corruption of the church and is equally willing to fight against it. However, they will never agree to make this truth public. If I come to you, I will only end up like the Black Emperor. I'm sorry, Your Excellency the Archbishop, I don't want to end up like the Black Emperor." Colin shrugged and refused directly. "Just the two of us, even if the truth is revealed, we will never escape the pursuit of the church and the Paladin family, and we will also be slandered as madmen and blasphemers, and no one will believe our words. Your Excellency, Viscount, I am not a stupid person. Of course, I will not disclose this truth before I have enough strength. And the reason why I chose you as a partner is because you are not from the Paladin family, but you have the potential to dominate an area or even a larger territory. Your Excellency, Archbishop, you think too highly of me." Colin's expression remained the same, indifferent. No, Ajani's eyes flashed with inexplicable brilliance, and her tone also had a hint of bewitchment. "You are now the guardian of the North, and I also know that the half-elf kingdom is also under your control. Even in the future, it is not impossible for you to march eastward, defeat the Pegasus army again, and march into Belu city. However, have you ever thought about a question? Even if one day you really conquer the Eastern Territory, and can the Lai family become a Duke family?" Colin's heart moved, and he seemed to understand what Ajani wanted to say. "Your Excellency, the title of Duke of the Empire has never been granted to someone who is not from the Holy Knight family. No matter what dazzling achievements he has made. I know that your talent is amazing and that you are already a 5th level knight at a young age, but do you think you can become a paladin?" Colin did not answer. However, he felt that if he could drink the blood of the Holy Knight, he might not be able to set foot in the Holy Land. "I'm not trying to hit you, but in the Empire's more than 1,000 years of history, no one from the Holy Knight family has ever set foot in the Holy Land. I don't know what secrets there are. However, I think even if you were talented, you may not be able to break these shackles. So, even if you become a 6th level knight, how different are you from that 6th level warrior, Lucien? He is attached to Count Schultz, and they are also inseparable from the St. Hilda family. Even if one day you lead an army to conquer the Eastern Territory, the Angelet family will never become the lord of the Eastern Territory." Colin narrowed his eyes and asked in a deep voice, "What exactly do you want to say?" Ajani took a few steps closer, stared into Colin's eyes, and said seriously, "Aren't you always asking me why I chose you as a partner? This is the real reason. Because you are not people from the Paladin family. The current belief system is based on deception. The only people who don't want to see it collapse are actually the church and the Paladin family. That's why they will join forces to conceal the truth and prevent a crisis of faith from happening. However, as a descendant of a non-Paladin family, Viscount Angelet, even if a crisis of faith occurs and the belief system of the Radiant Church collapses, is it really a bad thing for you? Without the power of faith, there will be no priests. No, without priests, new knights cannot be born, and naturally, there will be no more paladins. Without paladins, why do the current royal family and the 4 major families stand at the top of the empire? Why can't the Angelet family become dukes? Even." Ajani suddenly stopped talking, but Colin had completely understood what she meant. At the same time, he also saw clearly the true face hidden under Ajani's pious appearance. That face was filled with something called ambition. Moreover, he was also frightened by Ajani's madness. This woman looks holy, peaceful, and compassionate, but in fact, she is a crazy careerist who wants the world to be in chaos. Seeing that Colin was silent, Ajani thought that he had already moved but could not make up his mind yet, so she once again said seductively, "Your Excellency, the conflict between the royal family and the church is our best opportunity. This time the royal family is fighting during your trip to Dragon City. Emperor Reinhard must have encouraged you to march to the east, right? To be honest, His Majesty the Pope has told me many times to prevent the Northern Army from successfully capturing Belu City. However, if you and I cooperate, I can help you block all pressure from the church and promise you a stable rear area, so that you can march into the east without any distractions. As long as we conquer the Eastern Territory and hold both territories, we will have the capital to not be afraid of the church and the royal family." Colin sneered and said, "Your Excellency, Archbishop, have you forgotten that there are still 2 paladins in the Empire? Are they going to sit back and watch as the 2 of us shake the foundation of the entire Cavaliers system?" Ajani said confidently, "Your Excellency, Viscount, have you forgotten that there is also a force in the east that can fight against the paladins?" Jevil? Kalin's expression changed, and he realized something in an instant, and immediately said, "So you and Mr. Jin are in the same group?" Ajani suddenly smiled, her beautiful face blooming like a peach blossom. "Your Majesty the Viscount, are you confident in our plan now?" Obviously, Ajani acquiesced to Colin's guess. Colin lowered his head, with various thoughts circulating in his mind. He did not expect that the lingering Mr. Jin had quietly reached into the church. He also bribed high-level figures like the Archbishop of the North. No wonder he dared to kidnap the Bishop of Swan City and even kill him without fear of retaliation from the church. Ajani would definitely cover him and help him survive. They have been through the weakest period at present. And now, they have turned their attention to Colin again, trying to win over the actual controller of the northern border. I have to say that Colin is a little moved. He suddenly realized that this was indeed a good opportunity. Originally, Colin was caught between the royal family and the church. Both parties in the fight were wooing him, but both wanted him to be a sharp sword in their hands. Now that a third party has been added, what choice will Colin make? The room will be greater, and the space for maneuvering will be wider. At least, if Ajani and Colin reach a secret agreement, then he will not have to worry about the church stirring up trouble in the north when he marches into the east. Making rain is holding him back. Of course, Colin is still very wary of Mr. Jin and Ajani. Neither of them are kind people. They like Colin and just want him to be his tool. That's all. I wonder if I can see Mr. Jin? Kellen asked tentatively. Ajani hesitated, but still nodded and said, "I will convey your intention to Mr. Zhang, but you must also know that Prince Lake is also in the north and is in need of him. It is difficult for Mr. Zhang to show up, so we may not be able to arrange a meeting with you in the near future." "I understand." Kaylin smiled faintly and didn't say much. He knew that he probably hadn't really gained the other party's trust yet. "By the way, can you help remove the magical spell that Vera has possessed?" Ajani shook her head and said, "I'm sorry, Your Majesty the Viscount, that was a magical spell performed by His Majesty the Pope himself, and only he can remove it. However, you don't have to worry. With me in the north, the church will never be a constraint for you. I will never use the Duke to cause you any trouble." "That's good." Kellen nodded. In fact, this is the biggest reason why he is willing to cooperate with Ajani. As for how the relationship between the two parties will develop in the future and whether they will fall out, let's wait until the future. Colin is confident that by then, he should already have the confidence to compete head-on with the other party. Happy cooperation. Ajani stretched out her white and tender little hand and said with a smile. Colin also held the other person's hand and showed a bright smile. Happy cooperation. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Original Vampire. Author, Logo Busroot. Chapter 347. Leaving the Glory Church, Colin walked slowly back to Swan Castle alone. I learned from the butler that Count Schultz had just gone out to inspect the territory. Colin didn't care either. Having just experienced Lucien's rebellion, the Countess also needed to quickly appease people's hearts and deal with some of the remaining forces left by Lucien. After losing the top warrior, Lucien, if the Schultz family still wants to maintain its current transcendent status in the north, it can only rely on Colin. I believe other people in the Schultz family can also figure this out and do something about it. Make the right choice. It wasn't until nightfall, when Colin, who had finished his dinner, was being served by his maid and was preparing to take a bath, that the butler came to report that Count Schultz had returned to Neuschwanstein Castle. I understand. I'll go see the Count after I finish taking a shower. Colin immersed his body in the hot water at a suitable temperature. While admiring the various exquisite decorations in the bathroom, he thought back to Archbishop Ajani and himself during the day. Those words were said. I have to admit that Colin really admires Mr. Jin from the St. Zion family. It seems that every time the other party can surprise him, of course, he may also be frightened. Colin was curious about how he instigated Ajani's rebellion. You must know that, as the youngest archbishop of the glorious empire and highly regarded by the Pope, Ajani has a bright future. She is almost certain to become a cardinal in the future. It is not impossible to even become the first female pope in the history of the empire. So, how did Mr. Jin persuade Ajani to give up such a bright future and choose another extremely dangerous path of rebellion? Colin couldn't understand. However, Colin actually didn't have many ill feelings towards Mr. Jin. Although the two sides have always been on opposite sides, Mr. Jin did not cause any substantial losses to Colin. Of course, this is also because Colin has never been Mr. Jin's main target. After all, Colin was just a small person before and was not worthy of Mr. Jin's special targeting. Now that he has become the Guardian of the North, Colin is eligible to be targeted, but unexpectedly, Mr. Jin actually chooses to win over him. Colin could also guess that the other party deliberately left Bishop John's body in the basement of Swansea Castle before, probably because he wanted to use the help of the Schultz family to get rid of Colin. But unexpectedly, Colin expelled Lucien from Swan City and successfully controlled Count Schultz. In addition, Mr. Jin was probably at his weakest period now. Seeing that Colin was not an easy character to deal with, he had no choice but to change his strategy and instead win over him. Of course, Colin was also extremely wary of Mr. Zhang. He knew that if Mr. Zhang could successfully survive this period of weakness, there would be a question mark as to whether he could continue to tolerate the North being in Colin's hands. Therefore, Colin knew that he must seize the opportunity to use the other party's healing time to work hard to strengthen his own strength and power, so that no matter how the situation in the glorious empire changes in the future, Colin would have the ability to protect himself. While thinking, Colin heard light footsteps approaching, but he didn't pay attention, thinking it was a maid coming to refill water. But then, a snow-white and exquisite foot reached into the water, followed by a long, white, and perfect calf. In Colin's surprised eyes, the naked Count Schultz was already sitting next to him. The Countess's body was impeccably perfect, her soft skin exuded a pearl-like luster, her plump buttocks were topped by a slender waist, and the two spots of bright red on top made Colin's blood boil. "Master, let me take care of your bath," Count Schultz whispered in Colin's ear, with a sultry smile between his eyes and eyebrows. The fragrant breath made Colin intoxicated, and his slightly stiff body gradually relaxed. The originally calm water surface suddenly became rippled. The morning light first appeared, and thousands of strands of rainbow fluorescence seemed to be broken, projected on the smooth mirror-like surface of Swan Lake. Colin stood on the balcony of the highest floor of Swan Castle, looking at the unreally beautiful scenery in front of him, feeling unprecedentedly comfortable in his heart. Taking a deep breath, your nose is filled with the fragrance of dew and flowers. Suddenly, there was a familiar sound of footsteps behind him. Colin turned around and saw Count Schultz approaching with enchanting steps. After one night, the already beautiful Countess looked even more gorgeous. She only wore a gauze silk dress. The low-cut, corseted waist and backless design made her beautiful body curves and smooth skin glow. Shone vividly. While walking, two slender, snow-white legs were looming between the slit skirt, like a blooming blue kite. "Good morning, Master." Count Schultz's charming smile made Colin's heart tremble. He touched the tip of his nose and said with a smile, "You should use your original title." "Yes, Your Excellency Viscount." Count Schultz changed his title in a good-natured manner, but his respectful attitude did not change at all. After a night of in-depth communication, Colin also understood that Count Schultz was actually a woman without many opinions. Her weak character was not suitable for becoming a lord, so she chose to marry him before. Lucienne now clings to Colin without hesitation. However, such a character is indeed easier for Colin to control. The ambiguous past between you and Marquis Garcia must have been made up specifically to pretend to be Vera's biological mother, right? Yes, a blush rose on Count Schultz's fair cheeks. However, Duke St. Hilda did intend to bring me and Marquis Garcia together, but Marquis Garcia did not want to give up the command of the Black Cavalry. His importance on the northern front line became more and more prominent, so Duke St. Hilda gave up. Then why did you betray Duke St. Hilda when you were in Ice Rock City? Actually, I did the same at the beginning. I had no choice. Among the 200,000 troops that Marquis Charles buried, there was one of the most elite troops of the Schultz family. After learning about this, complaints spread within the family. I am also very dissatisfied with Duke St. Hilda. Then they followed a group of northern lords and wanted to force the Duke to give us an explanation. Colin nodded and asked, "How many soldiers do the Schultz family have left to fight now?" Earl Schultz gently tucked the ends of his hair behind his ears and said, "We should be able to gather an army of 60,000 or 70,000 people." Okay. You should have reorganized this army recently. I may need to recruit you at any time. Yes. We will return to Winter City tomorrow. If you need help with anything else, please tell me as soon as possible. Are you leaving so soon? Count Schultz asked in surprise, with a heavy look on his pretty face. Reluctant to give up. Yes, Colin stretched out his hand to pull the Countess into his arms, put his hands around her elastic waist, and said warmly, "I can't rest now, I have to race against time." "Why are you so anxious?" Kaylin sniffed the fragrance of Earl Schultz's hair and said vaguely, "I have a premonition that the Empire will undergo great changes, therefore, I must prepare in advance." "A great change?" Earl Schultz's voice tightened. "You don't have to panic, just do as I say." "Yes. In addition, you have to be careful of Archbishop Ajani and don't believe what she says easily. There is also the Shensi who appeared before Duke Schultz. If he appears in Swan City again, send me a message immediately." "Okay." After explaining these, Colin reached out to grab Count Schultz's smooth chin, lowered his head and kissed it. "Parting is imminent, so we must say goodbye properly." The Original Vampire. Author, Logo Busroot. Chapter 348. Encounter at Dawn. The rising sun sheds soft morning light through the dense clouds, and the mist that surges like water waves envelops the mountains, forests, and wilderness. A large-scale merchant team was marching on the forest path under the morning dew. In front of the team, a flag embroidered with tulips was fluttering in the wind. After passing through a rugged road, the axle made a squeaking sound on the bumps, and the curtain of the carriage suddenly opened, revealing a round, fat face. "Master Oliver, what are your orders?" a mercenary guarding the carriage asked with a smile. Oliver looked at the narrow path ahead carefully, frowned and asked, "Why did you choose this road?" "Sir, although this road is a little more difficult, the distance is shorter. It is estimated that we can reach Swan Island in 3 days' sitting." Oliver still seemed to have a calm look on his face and asked, "Where is your captain?" "The captain is right in front," the mercenary was talking when he suddenly saw a figure walking towards him quickly and immediately said, "Sir, the captain is just here." Oliver turned his head and saw Captain Jack with a big beard already arriving at the carriage. The leader of the mercenary group frowned and looked worried. "Lord Oliver, I just got the news that something happened in Swan City." "What?" Oliver's heart suddenly changed, and his expression changed instantly, and he asked quickly, "What happened?" "I heard that Count Schultz's husband passed away. Sir Sean murdered Bishop John and is now being hunted by the army." "How could this happen? Why did Lucien murder Bishop John?" "I don't know." "Then can we still enter Swan City?" "It should be possible. Swan City is not blocked. However, I advise you to think twice. After all, Swan City is not peaceful now." Oliver frowned, his whole fat face was squeezed together in worry, and there was a war between heaven and man in his heart. Upon seeing this, Captain Jack provided another piece of information. "In addition, I also heard that Viscount Angelet is in Swan City now. It was he who exposed Lucien's crime." "Viscount Angelet is also in the city." Oliver suddenly perked up, as if the name had a strange magic power. "Yes." Captain Jack nodded, and then asked tentatively, "I heard that you have dealt with the Viscount before. Is this true?" Oliver suddenly puffed up his chest, and there was an infinite look on his face. Rong Guang boasted loudly. "Of course it's true. I think we knew each other before Lord Viscount inherited the title. We even slept in the same tent and went to the battlefield together." Just as Oliver spat Fey, when he was about to brag to the mercenary leader in front of him about the prosperous years he had with Viscount Angelet, the ground suddenly began to tremble slightly. "An earthquake?" Oliver asked stupidly. But before long, the shaking of the earth became more and more severe, and even the blades of grass shook violently. Crash! It was like rolling spring thunder exploding the earth, or like a raging flood sweeping over. The broken sand and stones on the earth danced, as if they were picked up and put down by invisible big hands. Viewed from a high altitude, it was like boiling water. "It's the cavalry," Captain Jack pointed forward with a trembling finger, and his voice changed. Countless black shadows instantly appeared on the horizon ahead, filling the sky and the earth. The densely packed cavalry came in overwhelming numbers, like a tornado, crushing the gravel and dead grass on the ground. Oliver and the others seemed dumbfounded, trembling on the spot, completely at a loss. It was impossible to run away. I could only pray silently in my heart that this terrible cavalry was not the enemy. "It's the blood cavalry." Someone didn't know who saw the bloody flag fluttering in the wind and shouted immediately. When Oliver heard this, his eyes suddenly shone, and he ran out of the carriage in a hurry. He looked at a cavalry team galloping towards him and shouted at the top of his lungs. "We are the Tulip Chamber of Commerce, the Tulip Chamber of Commerce. I recognize Lord Viscount Lieutenant." Not long after, a small team of blood cavalry came to Oliver. The officer leading it sat high on the horse and stared at Oliver coldly through the holes in the armor. The intimidating aura exuding from his whole body made the entire caravan stay silent. "What's your name?" My name is Oliver, and I am the president of the Tulip Chamber of Commerce. Is Viscount Angelet in front?" The blood cavalry officer nodded and said, "Follow me, Lord Viscount, I want to see you." Oliver cheered up and quickly ordered his men to bring in a horse to pull the cart, then he moved his fat body and climbed up awkwardly. Seeing his difficult appearance, the officer got impatient, so he stepped forward and grabbed Oliver by the collar. Amid his exclamations, he lifted him up and laid him on his horse, then urged the horse to ride, heading towards the direction of the large blood cavalry army. By the time Oliver came to Colin, he was already jolted to the point of death. "Viscount Angelet, ugh." After the guy got off his horse, he vomited all over the floor, and then weakly greeted Colin again. Colin looked at this familiar fat face, asked the attendant to pass a bottle of water, and asked with a smile, "Oliver, I heard that you are now the president of the Tulip Chamber of Commerce." Oliver drank some water and finally calmed down. Quickly replied, "Yes, Lord Viscount, after Ms. Penny's death, I was favored by Count Umon and took over the Tulip Chamber of Commerce." The Count Umon in Oliver's mouth was Vala. Of course, this appointment was actually approved by Colin. He had a good impression of the fat businessman. After taking control of the Umon family through Vala, he signaled the other party to promote Oliver to the position of president of the Tulip Chamber of Commerce. Subsequently, the obedient and sensible Oliver began to clean up the remaining forces of the Thean family in the Tulip Chamber of Commerce under the instruction of Vala. The current progress is said to be going smoothly. "Are you going to Swan City?" "Yes, Sir." Oliver rolled his little eyes and took the opportunity to ask, "I heard that the situation in Swan City is a bit chaotic now. I wonder if our trip will—" "Don't worry." Colin waved his hand and consoled him, "the Schultz family has stabilized the situation. You won't have any problems if you go." "That's good." Oliver breathed a sigh of relief, and he said to Colin, "There is an inexplicable trust." Colin looked at this old acquaintance and suddenly asked, "I heard that the major businessmen in the North are planning to unite recently to establish a Northern Business Federation." "Yes, Sir." Oliver glanced at Colin. With a look on his face, Colin replied cautiously, "Our Tulip Chamber of Commerce is also planning to join the Northern Merchants Federation. Count Umon also knows about this and has agreed." Colin nodded and added, "This businessman who is the president of the Federation?" "Sir, the candidate for the president has not been decided yet. However, at the end of this month we plan to hold a plenary meeting in Winter City to decide on the candidate for the president." Colin touched his chin and said nothing. "Know what to think?" After a moment, he spoke again, "Oliver, do you want to be the president of the Northern Merchants Federation?" The fat all over Oliver's body trembled, and he didn't know whether it was because of nervousness or excitement. After hesitating for a moment, he gave a smooth answer, "I will obey your orders." Colin smiled faintly, and did not comment on Oliver's answer, but instead said, "Help me spread a message. Tell the major merchants and chambers of commerce in the North that the St. Hilda family is prepared to borrow money to tide over the current difficulties, and the amount of the loan is huge, so that interested businessmen will come to Winter City before the end of the month." "Yes," Oliver quickly agreed. However, Colin no longer mentioned the matter of asking him to be the president of the Merchants Federation. Oliver was itchy, but he did not dare to take the initiative to ask. "Okay, go to Swan City by yourself. Remember to come to Winter City to meet me before the end of the month." "Yes, sir." Then, Colin gently pinched the horse's belly, and under Oliver's worried eyes, he merged into the Blood Knight. Among the large troops of the army, they went all the way north. The Original Vampire. Author, Ludo Busroot. Chapter 349. It was already the end of summer, the weather was getting cooler and the sunshine was no longer harsh. Colin led the Blood Cavalry all the way north and arrived at Winter City in only 6 days. It was evening, and the towering Winter City looked even more solemn and solemn under the setting sun. When Colin arrived under the city wall, he found that Vera was already standing in front of the suspension bridge to greet the men returning from afar. She was wearing a purple lady's dress, which highlighted her beautiful body curves without losing her dignity and elegance. The right amount of light makeup made her already beautiful face even more bright and attractive. Her beautiful eyes looking at Colin were filled with tenderness and sweetness. Colin felt warm in his heart, and immediately got off his horse and strode up. Although he wanted to hug the lovely girl in front of him, Colin suppressed this impulse and kneeled down on one knee to salute his lord in accordance with the proper aristocratic etiquette. But he didn't expect that Vera had already grabbed Colin before he knelt down and said affectionately, "Kellen, welcome home." Colin immediately stopped caring about the red tape and leaned over to Kisway. She pulled her smooth forehead and said with a smile, "My wife, you are extremely beautiful today." Vera smiled sweetly, then took Colin's arm and walked into the city together. "Hello, teacher." Prince Harrison and Princess Judy greeted them crisply inside the city gate. Colin nodded to the two little guys and then helped Vera get into the carriage. Surrounded by a group of guards, the carriage passed through half of the city and arrived at the roaring castle on the top of the mountain. The servants had already prepared a sumptuous dinner to welcome Colin's return. Walking into the knight's hall with Vera, the air was filled with the faint fragrance of roses. Marquis Garcia, dressed in neat aristocratic attire, stood in the middle of the hall with his hands tied, nodding to Colin. Compared with more than a month ago, Marquis Garcia is in much better spirits, and there is some blood on his face, but his body is still stooped, holding a cane in his hand, and his eyes are no longer sharp, as if he were the all-powerful North Realm army god, which has completely disappeared. Colin quickly bowed in return and exchanged a look with the other party, but said nothing more. At this time, Bachelor Dawn, Knight Campbellin, Bishop Emeritus and others also saluted and greeted Colin. Master Joyce was also in the hall, but this young man was not very good at hiding his emotions and anger. He nodded perfunctorily to Colin, then puffed his cheeks and looked at the ground, as if he was reluctant to appear here. Of course Colin would not pay attention to a little brat throwing a tantrum, and immediately invited everyone to sit down. For such a formal dinner, everyone has their own seat. Colin and Vera sit side by side in the main seat. On their right are Marquis Garcia and Bishop Emeritus, on their left are Prince Harrison and Princess Judy, and below them is Jo. Ace, Master Dawn, and knights from the St. Hilda family. Since Archbishop Ajani is still handling Bishop John's funeral affairs in Swan City, the Emeritus Bishop in Winter City represents the church at the welcome dinner. Colin looked around and didn't see the former Imperial Minister of Agriculture who was abducted from Winter Springtown, so he asked, "Why don't you see Bachelor Sonny?" Bachelor Dawn smiled slightly and said, "Master Sonny, he said that he wanted to investigate the Northern Territory to prepare for the next agricultural reform, so he is not in Winter City now." Colin nodded, thinking that this Bachelor Sonny was really dedicated. He started investigating as soon as he arrived, so he didn't ignore him, smiled and let Vera announce the start of the banquet. Vera immediately picked up the gold wine glass and said loudly, "Everyone, please drink this glass to the full. May the glory of the Lord of Glory protect us, and may the St. Hilda family be prosperous forever." Everyone picked up the wine glasses and responded loudly. And Colin drained the champagne in his glass and said with a smile, "Everyone, please enjoy tonight's food." Everyone cheered and then began to concentrate on the food on the table. In this world, holding a family banquet is a very serious matter for a lord, and there is a very standardized etiquette. During the meal, no one is allowed to talk until the main course is served and the plate is tapped with a knife and fork to indicate that it is full. Only then can one chat with other full people. The whole process is quite dull, and the only fun is to see who eats more. This is actually part of the etiquette. The more you eat, the more satisfied you are with the food arranged by the Lord, and it can also show your strength and bravery. The cooking skills of the St. Hilda family chefs are, of course, top-notch. Charcoal grilled alligator tail, white fungus oysters, steamed salmon, wine-roasted foie gras, cream salad, all kinds of delicacies filled the huge long table. Amidst the clanging sounds of knives and forks, everyone tried to stuff all the food into their stomachs while maintaining etiquette. The maids, like butterflies in flowers, kept changing clean plates and refilling drinks for everyone with light steps. Although Colin did not need these ordinary foods to replenish energy, he looked at the people with high appetites and began to feast. The maid behind him had already changed the plates for him 4 times. Seeing that the maid was preparing to change his plate for the 5th time, Colin finally tapped the plate to indicate that he was full. Vera on the side had already finished eating. Seeing this, she smiled and said, "Kellen, you have a good appetite today." "Yes, I still miss the food at home after being away from the north for so long." The emeritus bishop also said he knocked on the plate, put down his knife and fork, and asked, "Your Excellency, Viscount, I heard that Bishop John of Swan City was killed by Lucien. To be precise, he was murdered by Lucien in collusion with outsiders." Next, Colin selectively told everyone what happened in Swan City. Of course, he did not mention the Duke St. Hilda who had returned from the dead, but only used a mysterious man instead. The fact that Mr. Jin borrowed a corpse to bring back the soul is too weird to explain clearly. Moreover, Colin and Mr. Jin have now reached a secret cooperation agreement, and he does not want to cause unnecessary trouble. Even though Colin had hidden the weirdest part, everyone still looked shocked, obviously not expecting that the peak warrior, Count Schultz's husband, would do such a thing. May the light of our Lord illuminate Bishop John and let his soul rest in peace. After hearing this, the emeritus bishop looked complicated and lowered his head in prayer. Seeing this scene, everyone bowed their heads and prayed to express their condolences. Colin looked at the people praying devoutly with a complex expression, thinking, if they knew that the Lord of Glory could no longer hear their prayers and could no longer receive the power of their faith, would these people still remain pious? After the prayer, everyone started chatting. Seeing that everyone had finished their main meal, the butler directed the maids to serve desserts. Colin and Vera shared various experiences from their trip to Dragon City, and the atmosphere gradually became soothing and harmonious. However, Colin noticed that Joyce had been whispering in Princess Judy's ear, making Judy giggle from time to time. This made Colin's expression change slightly. He was very curious. Did Joyce really have such a rapport with Princess Judy, or did he deliberately get close to the princess under the guidance of a caring person? If it was the latter. The candles on the long table gradually burned out, and the dinner came to an end. Vera stood up and announced the end of the banquet, then took Colin's hand and walked out. However, at the door of the Knight's Hall, Colin stopped and waited for Marquis Garcia to catch up. He smiled at Vera and said, "You go back first, and I will have a chat with the Marquis." "Okay." Vera Wenwan smiled and left immediately. Marquis Garcia nodded to Colin and said, "Follow me to the study." "Okay." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Original Vampire. Author, Ludo Busroot. Chapter 350. When Colin walked into the study, he noticed that the layout had completely changed. The tables, chairs, cabinets, floors, and windows are all rebuilt with brand new mahogany, and the entire study is filled with a touch of wood. The snow-white walls are inlaid with a row of white crystals. These crystals are a special arcane material that can amplify light. Without too many candles, the entire study can be as bright as day. There was originally a huge and colorful tiger head specimen hanging above the fireplace. It was said that it was hunted by the previous generation of Duke St. Hilda himself, but it has now disappeared and been replaced by a gorgeous garland of blood roses. The changes in the study also seem to imply that the owner of the castle had changed. Count Schultz is not Vera's biological mother. Fortunately, you were not fooled, Marquis Garcia said. Colin nodded, and then carefully tested, then, Vera's biological mother is. Marquis Garcia looked at Colin with a warning look, hesitated for a moment, and then said, "You don't need to know who it is. All you need to know is that she is no longer alive, so no matter who comes forward and claims to be Vera's biological mother, it is all false." Colin sighed secretly, thinking that Queen Midla also lied. Man, what a fucking bunch of actors. Fortunately, I am too. Then, who are the people who know the true identity of Vera's biological mother? Colin asked again. Because he realized that Mr. Jin dared to let Count Schultz pretend to be Vera's biological mother, and was sure that Marquis Garcia did not dare to expose them publicly. He obviously knew the true identity of Vera's biological mother, and knew that this identity should be kept secret. The question is, how did Mr. Jin know? Queen Midla knew about this, and Colin could understand it. After all, they were brothers and sisters, so it was not surprising to learn some of his brother's secrets. But Mr. Jin, could it be that when he took over Duke St. Hilda's body, he also gained his memories? Why do you ask? Marquis Garcia looked at Colin with vigilant eyes. Colin had no choice but to tell the story of how Mr. Jin might have taken over the body of Duke St. Hilda and resurrected him, and tricked Count Schultz into pretending to be Vera's biological mother. Of course, he did not reveal the secret cooperation agreement that Ajani and he later reached in the church basement. Marquis Garcia was silent for a long time after hearing this, his expression constantly changing. In fact, Marquis Garcia knew that what was buried in the family tomb was not his brother's real body, and he confessed to Colin when he exchanged him from the East. He could also understand the necessity of using a fake corpse to fool him under the circumstances. He did not blame Colin too harshly. He just said that after Vera successfully inherited the position of Duke, he would then ask the Morrison family for the last Duke's remains. But unexpectedly, the body was already occupied by Mr. Jin. Moreover, this kind of resurrecting of a corpse was so unbelievable that Marquis Garcia found it difficult to accept it for a while. After pondering for a while, Marquis Garcia suddenly said, "You don't have to worry about this matter. I will personally negotiate with the Morrison family." Colin's heart moved, and he immediately realized that the St. Hilda family and the Morrison family, I'm afraid there are some connections that I don't know about. Even the St. Hilda family knew about the pool of blood under the Morrison family clock tower. If you think about it more carefully, does the St. Hilda family have ulterior motives for marrying so many of their noble daughters to the Morrison family? Thinking that so many innocent girls were probably used as tools for some bloody research by the two families without knowing it, Colin couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. But he also knew that this should involve some shady secrets of the St. Hilda family, and Marquis Garcia obviously did not want him to have too much contact with them. In desperation, Colin had no choice but to nod in agreement, then changed the subject and told the story about Vera being cast by Pope Gregory when she was baptized. After listening quietly, Marquis Garcia fell into silence again. After a while, he asked, "Do you know what the biggest difference between Ceres and me was at the beginning?" Colin was stunned for a moment, and then Marquis Garcia realized what he was talking about. The Ceres in his mouth was the name of the previous generation of Duke St. Hilda. It should be the development direction of the Northern Territory, right? Colin recalled the various conflicts between the two brothers. The Duke wants to capture the rich but weak Eastern Territory, and you only want to destroy the Troll Empire. That's right, Marquis Garcia nodded, with a look of emotion on his face. At this time last year, after we annihilated an army of 300,000 trolls on the Sky Ice Field, Ceres couldn't hold it in any longer. He is determined to go eastward. For this reason, he did not hesitate to marry Vera to the half-elf kingdom, just to control the key to the east. At the same time, he also forced me to lead the Black Cavalry army eastward. Unfortunately, Mr. Jin's conspiracy completely disrupted Ceres's plan. Colin Moran had personal experience with Vera's marriage to the half-elf kingdom. At that time, he was still complacent and thought he had taken advantage of it. In fact, looking back now, he himself is just an ignorant chess piece drifting on the chessboard. Ceres wants to march into the Eastern Territory. In addition to coveting the riches of the Eastern Territory, it is also because the royal family is instigating it behind his back. Marquis Garcia glanced at Colin and asked, "This time when we go to Yulong City, Reinhardt the Emperor and Queen Midla should have also tried to win over you, right?" Colin nodded and said, "Yes, they really hope that I can march into the East and cut off the Church's biggest supporter in the secular world." Marquis Garcia stared into Colin's eyes, and asked, "What do you think?" Colin looked at Marquis Garcia's serious expression and changed his words, "I think human beings should not kill each other. This will give alien races an opportunity to take advantage of it." Marquis Garcia's, as expected, A gratified smile appeared on his face, and he nodded. As long as you understand, as a knight, the most important character is loyalty. I remember asking you when I was in Ice Rock City, what is loyalty? Colin nodded and involuntarily touched the blade of judgment at his waist, and scenes from the past gradually came to mind. Marquis Garcia continued, loyalty does not mean being loyal to a certain person, because people's hearts are unpredictable and changeable. The only thing that is truly worthy of your infinite loyalty is a certain belief. Faith. Colin chewed and added. Marquisia's words seemed to make sense in his heart. The knight's belief is to protect. Marquis Garcia's face became extremely pious. My whole life is to protect the human race. This is my belief. No matter what happens, no matter where I am, I will always be loyal. It's about it. At this point, Marquis Garcia patted Colin's shoulder heavily and said seriously, I hope you can also find a belief worthy of your infinite loyalty. Only in this way will you not be trapped in nothingness. He lost himself in the endless struggle for power and profit. Colin looked at Marquis Garcia's pure and fearless eyes and felt the weight on his shoulders. He suddenly understood why this Marquis spent the first half of his life. They were all thrown on the most difficult front line in the north, and regarded the trolls as their lifelong enemies. And the entanglement between him and his brother turned out to be because of this. Perhaps, this is the real knight, this is the guardian of the human race. For a moment, the rickety figure of Marquis Garcia grew taller in Colin's eyes. I understand, Colin said seriously. Marquis Garcia smiled lightly and said, I have always been optimistic about you, don't let me down. After saying this, he turned and walked out the door. Colin suddenly said, Your Majesty, Marquis, I am planning to implement Bachelor Sonny's agricultural reform plan in the north, and I am also preparing to borrow money. Marquis Garcia waved his hand without looking back, and interrupted, These government affairs are not necessary. Tell me, you can just take care of it yourself. After all, you are now the guardian of the North and Vera's husband. You have the qualifications and the obligation to help her manage the North. Okay. Colin secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He actually did not want to be restricted by Marquis Garcia, but fortunately, the other party did not have this intention either. Immediately, Colin said again, in addition, I will go to the half-elf kingdom next month to purchase food. I hope you can help control the northern border. Marquis Garcia turned around, with a hint of sadness on his face. A narrow smile, is Queen Elsa going to give birth soon? Seeing through her true purpose, Colin smiled awkwardly and nodded. Marquis Garcia didn't say much. After all, he had an illegitimate daughter himself, and he didn't blame Colin on this issue. Be careful on the road. Marquis Garcia nodded casually and walked out of the study. Yes. The Original Vampire. Author, Logo Busroot. Chapter 352. Winter City. As the most famous tavern in the east of the city, the Butter Tavern declined a large number of patrons today. Why can't we let him in when he can? At the door of the tavern, the young drunkard who was stopped by the waiter pointed at the guest who had just been welcomed in and asked. The waiter politely explained, I'm sorry, but the gentleman just now has an invitation. So, your tavern is booked today? Yes. The drunkards suddenly made a noise and vented their dissatisfaction. But no one dared to really rush in. As regular customers of the Butter Tavern, they all know that this pub has a profound background. It is said that the owner of the pub has a close relationship with the noble master in the castle on the top of the mountain. In this way, who dares to make trouble here? Doesn't he want to live in the north? After the drunkards dispersed, the tavern welcomed two dark-skinned guests. The two have similar faces, and they are brothers at first glance. Moreover, the dark skin color showed that the two of them had been traveling abroad for many years. Coupled with the wealthy but tacky temperament that could not be concealed, the attendant basically judged that these two people should be doing business all year round, and most likely they were tonight's guests. Sure enough, one of them took out the invitation and handed it to the attendant. The attendant glanced at it and immediately opened the door respectfully, saying, "Welcome, Mr. Oliver, Mr. Alma." Brother Oliver then walked into the tavern. There were already hundreds of guests gathered inside. Looking around, Oliver found that most of them were familiar faces. Mr. Oliver. Before the two of them got familiar with the environment, a bunch of people came up to say hello. Oliver seemed to have expected such a scene, and immediately put on airs, put on a reserved smile, and dealt with the people who came. Oliver was not actually the organizer of this gathering of merchants in the north, and the Tulip Chamber of Commerce was not the most powerful force in the north. Especially after the Uman family suffered a big change, businessmen who knew the details of the Tulip Chamber of Commerce no longer looked favorably on this Chamber of Commerce. However, this situation suddenly took a 180-degree turn recently. The reason is also very simple. The businessmen discovered that Mr. Oliver, the little-known new president of the Tulip Chamber of Commerce, was actually familiar with Count Angeli. In fact, there have been rumors that Oliver and Count Angeli are familiar with each other for a long time, but it was not until recently that Count Angeli specially sent a message to the major merchants in the north through Oliver that everyone was finally convinced of the authenticity of the rumors. As a result, Oliver and the Tulip Chamber of Commerce suddenly prospered overnight. Mr. Oliver, is the St. Hilda family really planning to borrow money? How much are they planning to borrow? Mr. Oliver, will Count Angeli also go to Silvermoon City this year to conduct centralized food procurement? Mr. Oliver, Troll, can you please ask Count Angelet to release another batch of the Empire's tax exemption quotas? Mr. Oliver. Various questions came one after another, and Oliver didn't know how to answer them for a while, so he had to put a smile on his round, fat face. He smiled politely, pretended not to hear everyone's questions clearly, and just kept shaking hands and greeting the businessmen around him. Ding ding. In front of the bar, a middle-aged man with a big belly knocked on the goblet in his hand. After everyone's attention was focused, he said loudly, "Everyone, your enthusiasm is almost scaring Mr. Oliver, so please exercise restraint just a moment." The people surrounding Oliver dispersed with laughter. To be able to make so many businessmen so obedient, this middle-aged man certainly has an extraordinary status. Mr. Arnold, Oliver walked a few steps quickly, came to the bar, and shook hands with this person cordially. "Thank you for inviting us to come to this event." This Mr. Arnold is the organizer of this business gathering, and he is also the organizer of this event. The owner of the Butter Tavern, of course, has a more prominent identity as the president of the Northwind Chamber of Commerce. The Northwind Chamber of Commerce has always had a close relationship with the St. Hilda family. There are even rumors that this Chamber of Commerce was actually funded by the St. Hilda family, and Arnold was just a white glove who was pushed to the stage. Over the years, Arnold, under the banner of the St. Hilda family, has indeed become a powerful influencer and a prominent figure in the northern business community. At this time, when the Northern Merchants Federation was formed, Arnold naturally responded to the request, and almost all the prominent merchants in the Northern Territory were present. "Mr. Oliver, Mr. Alma, it's my honor for you to come to this event. Please take a seat and taste the champagne that I have treasured for many years. Our meeting will begin soon." Brother Oliver agreed with a smile, and was then led by the attendant to sit down at a round table near the front. After Arnold's interruption, all the businessmen realized that this meeting was mainly to discuss the formation of the Northern Merchants Federation, not a lone meeting of the St. Hilda family. Therefore, everyone had to suppress the heat in their hearts, stop pestering Oliver, and prepare to ask the other party carefully after a while. After waiting for a while, the door of the tavern opened again, and a young knight wearing armor and carrying a sword walked in. Now the tavern, which was finally quiet, became noisy again. The businessmen whispered among themselves, wondering why there were knights attending this business meeting. But some people recognized the knight's identity and couldn't help but turn their attention to Arnold. At this time, Arnold stepped forward quickly and personally welcomed the young knight to the front desk. At the same time, he said loudly to a group of businessmen, "Everyone, please allow me to introduce you. This is Sabas, the governor of the Senate, the official's eldest grandson, Knight Weber St. Hilda." Bang bang bang. The audience burst into warm applause. All the merchants were in high spirits. The appearance of Knight Weber confirmed the fact that Arnold was indeed closely related to the St. Hilda family. It seemed that the establishment of the Northern Merchants Federation should be the will of the St. Hilda family. Only the two Oliver brothers had different expressions on their faces. They were whispering below and looking in the direction of the pub door from time to time. With a reserved smile on his face, Knight Weber nodded to the businessmen in the audience. In fact, he didn't want to come here because, when he left Yulong City, his grandfather Sebastian had warned him to keep a low profile in the north, not to do anything that might anger Colin, and not to follow Beifeng. The Chamber of Commerce has too many contacts. But the young and energetic Weber had never been so groveling. In addition, the Beifeng Chamber of Commerce gave money and women, which made Weber, who had been aggrieved for a long time, re-experience the fun that a playboy should have, and he agreed while he was still drinking. Arnold's invitation. In his opinion, attending a business meeting was just a trivial matter and should not attract Colin's attention. Arnold looked at the changes in the faces of the businessmen in the audience and felt proud. He did everything possible to invite Knight Weber to the venue this time, just to create an impression in the minds of northern merchants. The people standing behind the Northwind Chamber of Commerce are the St. Hilda family. It was by holding the banner of the St. Hilda family that Arnold was able to prosper in the north over the years. It was only recently that the changes in the Northern Territory were really dizzying, and the newly emerged Count Angeli seemed to have an unfriendly attitude toward merchants. Arnold then came up with the idea of forming the Northern Territory Merchants Federation, hoping to borrow the opportunity. This integrates the merchant forces in the north to cope with the changes in the situation. Just when Arnold was high-spirited and ready to deliver a speech, the door of the tavern opened again. Arnold frowned, thinking that the indifferent businessman was late and was about to scold him, but when he saw clearly the heroic face of the man who walked in, he suddenly froze on the spot. Knight Weber, who was already seated, immediately stood up, wiped the beer foam from the corner of his mouth, clasped his left hand on his chest, and stammered a salute to the visitor. "And, Count Angelet." Colin strode into the venue, and said with a smile as he walked, "Why didn't anyone notify me of such a lively party?" The Original Vampire. Author, Logo Busroot. Chapter 353. Your Majesty the Earl. Arnold greeted with a cautious salute, and an ominous premonition suddenly arose in his heart. Colin came to Knight Weber, patted his shoulder with a smile, and said, "Knight Weber, I didn't expect you to have so many businessmen friends in the north. Actually, I was just invited by Mr. Arnold. I came to the party and didn't know anyone else." Knight Weber responded with a stiff expression. He suddenly realized that he might have been taken advantage of by Arnold, and he also underestimated the importance Colin attached to this gathering of northern businessmen. During the time he came to the north, Knight Weber felt more and more how powerful Colin's power was. Unlike Dragon City, this place was completely Colin's home field. Archon Sabas's warning resurfaced again, and Knight Weber finally made up his mind to get out of this quagmire. "Lord Earl, it just occurred to me that there is still an urgent matter that needs to be dealt with, so please allow me to take my leave." Colin looked at Knight Weber with a smile. Seeing that the other party was timid, he couldn't help feeling a little regretful, but he was not embarrassed. The other party nodded instead. Knight Weber, as if he had been granted amnesty, hurried away without looking at Arnold, who was hesitant to speak. The atmosphere in the tavern suddenly changed. The merchants saw some clues from Knight Weber's embarrassing escape, and immediately realized that Arnold did not really have the support of the St. Hilda family. At least, the current real leader of the St. Hilda family, Count Angeli, is not on Arnold's side. Arnold was also in a state of confusion at the moment and didn't know what to do. In fact, he didn't take Colin's attitude into consideration. As a big businessman who has been in the business community in the North for decades, Arnold is certainly well aware of the changes in the situation in the North. Colin's rise was extremely rapid, which caught many people off guard, but Arnold had long noticed this upstart in the North, who was deeply admired by the Duke of St. Hilda and the Marquis of Garcia. It was just that the Troll Empire's trade terms and the suppression of food prices made Colin unconsciously stand on the opposite side of the major merchants in the North. Arnold also gnashed his teeth at Colin for a while, secretly hating him for cutting off his financial path. But after Vera succeeded in inheriting the Duke of the North, especially Archon Sabas's submission, Arnold had to recognize the reality and began to take the initiative to move closer to Colin. He first gave Colin a pair of expensive enchanted armor through Archon Sabas as a test. The results are great. Colin accepted the armor and wore it many times in public. Therefore, Arnold took it lightly and thought that Colin had no ill intentions towards the North Wind Chamber of Commerce. Who knows? The other party suddenly showed up uninvited today, and he looked menacing. At this moment, Arnold was a little confused. Mr. Arnold, at this time, Colin turned around and looked at Arnold, who was standing aside with a smile. "I'm here uninvited this time, I hope you don't mind." "Of course not, you can come as a welcome guest, the Butter Tavern is my honor." Arnold felt bitter in his heart, but on the surface he could only pretend to be flattered. Colin smiled faintly, and then said in a nonchalant manner, "Actually, I just want to say a few things briefly, and I will leave after I say it. I won't disturb your party." Okay, please speak." Arnold had to be obedient. He sat down and handed the podium to Colin. Of course Colin would not be polite and said loudly, "Everyone, I believe you have already heard the news from Oliver. The St. Hilda family is preparing to collect grain from you in the form of loans. I know that you have hoarded a large amount of grain in your hands and are preparing to take advantage of the increase in food prices during this famine to make a fortune. To be honest with you, I was originally planning to expropriate this food for free." As soon as these words came out, the whole place was in an uproar. But then, the businessmen closed their mouths under Colin's cold gaze. They knew that if they really pissed off the person in front of them, free expropriation would really happen. After all, the entire Northern Territory is now in the hands of the Collins, and the major lords dare not say a word. What can they, businessmen without an army, dare to do? Colin took in everyone's reactions one by one and didn't pay too much attention to these businessmen who dared to be angry but dared not speak out. He said this just to lower the expectations of businessmen so that subsequent measures would not cause too much backlash. However, the kind-hearted Duke is merciful and unwilling to take such extreme measures. Colin pushed Vera out to be a good person, while he himself played the role of a villain. Sure enough, the merchants immediately praised the Duke of the North. Colin stretched out his hand to press down, and the whole place immediately fell silent. He continued, "However, you don't want to use this method to make dirty money. I can tell you frankly that in a few days, I will go to the bank in person. Moon City purchases food. By then, a large amount of food will flood into the northern market just like last year, and food prices will not rise even if they want to. Don't even think about going to the half-elf kingdom to buy food, hoarding it, and being reluctant to sell it, because we have already reached an agreement with Queen Elsa, and the food from the half-elf kingdom will only be sold to the St. Hilda family." The merchants looked at each other, beating in their hearts. However, they still believed Colin's words. After all, Colin took care of all the food in the half-elf kingdom last year, and Queen Elsa also sent the Silver Moon Guards to help Colin guard Ice Rock City. Therefore, there is no doubt that Colin has control over the half-elf kingdom. Colin looked at the anxious businessman, his tone softened slightly, and said, "So, if you don't want the food you have hoarded to rot in the warehouse, seize this opportunity. This time, the St. Hilda family will collect the grain publicly, and everyone who is willing to lend their grain to the St. Hilda family will receive a bond of equal value. At this point, Colin clapped his hands. Immediately, a group of attendants filed in and distributed the prepared bond samples. Arnold also got a copy and discovered that the so-called bond was made of an unknown material, somewhat like papyrus, but thinner, whiter, and smoother. The value of the bond was written on the paper, ranging from £1, £5, £10, and £1,000. It also stated that the maturity time of the bond was 3 years later, and the interest rate was 8% per year. In fact, this is a bond designed by Colin based on the paper currency on Earth to be used as shadow currency. After Colin and everyone else got the bond sample, he emphasized, "Anyone, please note, anyone who comes to Lion's Roar Castle with these bonds after the expiration date can exchange them for grain of equal value. Of course, there is also interest generated during this period." The businessmen took these bonds and began to whisper and discuss. Paper money has not yet appeared in this world, so when businessmen look at these bonds with various denominations, they do not think of the real function of this thing. They are now only attracted by the 8% annual interest rate and feel that this is indeed a cost-effective deal. If the price of grain in the north continues to rise, the merchants will, of course, be unwilling to lend their grain stocks to the St. Hilda family. However, Colin has made it clear that he is determined to stabilize grain prices, and the merchants will naturally start to calculate the gains and losses. Instead of betting that the St. Hilda family cannot control food prices, it is better to exchange food for these bonds. At least this is a surefire deal. And if he continues to fight against the St. Hilda family with food in hand, he will definitely offend the murderous Count Angeli in front of him. They also all knew that the young Earl's title was not obtained by marrying the Duke of the North, but was actually obtained by killing him with a knife. The road to the title could be said to be paved with blood and corpses. "Lord Earl, please rest assured that our Bifeng Chamber of Commerce will definitely use all the stored grain in exchange for bonds." Arnold was the first to express his position. This guy is only thinking about how to please Colin, not to mention that this transaction will not actually make people happy. He lost money. With Arnold taking the lead, the other merchants also raised their voices and expressed their willingness to lend grain to the St. Hilda family. Colin nodded with satisfaction. He actually knew that, although it was profitable, it would be impossible for these businessmen to actually take out all the stored grain. It is estimated that many people want to take out part of it and wait and see how the situation develops. And then consider whether to continue exchanging grain for bonds. However, Colin is not in a hurry. Establishing bond credit also requires a process. I believe that after the first batch of bonds matures and is successfully exchanged, businessmen will believe and recognize the value of these bonds, and eventually equate bonds with grain. By then, Bachelor Sonny's new farming and animal husbandry system will gradually be rolled out, and the demand for currency in the market will also surge. Colin can also take the opportunity to announce that bonds can be used to pay taxes. In this way, bonds will truly have the function of currency. Moreover, businessmen will gradually find that these paper bonds are actually easier to carry and trade, and will be more willing to accept bonds as an alternative currency. In this way, the St. Hilda family also has a substantial right to mint coins. Perhaps the royal family will gradually react, but by then, the Northern Territory will have been fully developed, and Colin will no longer need to care about the royal family's questioning. Thinking of this, Colin felt more and more comfortable, and said again, "Thank you everyone for your support. Now, I will talk about the second thing." He looked around the field, and finally his eyes stopped on Arnold's face, and he said with a smile, "I am planning to form a Northern Foreign Trade Company. If you are willing, you can contribute money to participate. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Original Vampire. Author, Logo Busroot. Chapter 354. Northern Foreign Trade Company. When hearing such a new term come from Colin's mouth, the businessmen were immediately confused and looked at each other. But Arnold, who was staring directly at Colin, suddenly felt an inexplicable panic. "Weren't you complaining before that the preferential tax policy I reached with the Troll Empire has not been extended to the entire Northern Territory?" Facing Colin's question, the businessmen suddenly shook their heads like rattles and expressed that they had absolutely no complaints. Colin smiled lightly and did not intend to pursue the matter. Instead, he continued. "So, I plan to set up a foreign trade company to be responsible for the foreign trade of the North from now on. Except for this company, any individual or chamber of commerce in the North are not allowed to engage in foreign trade." Colin's words were like poking a hornet's nest, and the entire venue became agitated. "My Lord Earl, are you kidding me? My Lord Earl, you can't do this. My Lord Earl, you will destroy the business community in the North." At this time, the businessmen no longer wanted to take into account the gap in status and express their opposition to this proposal. After all, the profits from foreign trade are so huge, how can businessmen give up? For these benefits, they are willing to go to the gallows, let alone resist Colin. Colin stretched out his hands and pressed down calmly, signaling the merchants to be calm. After everyone calmed down for the time being, Colin continued, "Don't get excited. I don't want to cut off your financial resources, but I want to unite everyone's strength to make the foreign trade in the North develop better. This trading company is not mine. You have to be alone, but everyone can invest and participate. At the end of each year, the company will distribute the profits based on your investment ratio. This is actually a joint stock company, but it is still a new thing in this world." When the businessmen heard that they could at least share the profits from foreign trade, they no longer resisted and started asking Colin for some details. Colin also patiently gave answers. "Your Majesty, Earl, who will control this company?" "Of course, the ownership of the company is in the St. Hilda family. The Duke will appoint a management team to manage the company on his behalf. In addition, every businessman who contributes will become a director of a company, and all directors form the board of directors. You can understand this board of directors as an institution similar to the Senate. Each director has different voting rights according to the proportion of capital contribution. The board of directors cannot interfere with the daily operations of the company, but some of the company's major decisions, such as changes in the core personnel of the company's management team, the execution of large-scale trade, accounting audits, etc., all need to go through the board of directors." Colin was prepared to firmly hold the company's personnel and management rights in his hands, but in other matters some powers, such as supervision and suggestion rights, can be assigned to businessmen who invest. This is necessary, otherwise, no businessman is willing to hand over his money to an organization that is completely beyond his control, and this alien East India Company that Colin has high hopes for will not be able to develop and grow. Yes, in fact, the Northern Foreign Trade Company created by Colin was based on the East India Company on Earth. The wonderful use of this company will gradually be reflected in the future. From now on, your goods will all be sold to the Northern Foreign Trade Company, and the company will sell them overseas. If you want to buy overseas goods, you can also go to the company to place an order, and the company will purchase them overseas. In this way, when the Northern business community conducts foreign trade, it will be as a whole. We will advance together and retreat together, and we will have greater bargaining power when doing foreign trade, don't you think?" After hearing this, the businessmen all showed yearning on their faces. They also began to realize that this novel company would become a giant in the northern business world, and each businessman would attack cities and territories under the protection of this giant's wings, which would be better than doing it alone. Doe is much stronger. Colin watched the changes in everyone's faces and felt proud. In fact, when he formed this company, he mainly wanted to complete the integration and control of the northern business community by controlling this company. This was actually a ploy to drain the profits from the Northern Merchants Federation that Arnold wanted to form. Arnold seemed to have figured this out, and his face became extremely pale at this time. He knew that there was no need to establish the Northern Merchants Federation that he had been planning for a long time. Even if it is established, it will be just an empty shell. In the foreseeable future, the one who truly controls the business community in the North will definitely be the Northern Foreign Trade Company. Arnold suddenly felt discouraged. He didn't understand why a young aristocrat like Colin could have such a pattern and skills. In front of him, he seemed to be just a clown jumping around. Mr. Arnold, Colin suddenly called Arnold's name. Yes, Lord Earl. Arnold jumped up and stood up quickly. What do you think of this foreign trade company? What can I do? Can I say no? Arnold roared in his heart, but on the surface he had a shocked expression and exaggeratedly praised. Lord Earl, I think this is really a genius initiative. As long as you don't object, our Bifeng Chamber of Commerce is willing to invest 1.8 million gold coins to join the Northern Foreign Trade Company. Colin raised his eyebrows, expressing his disapproval of Arnold's decisiveness. Quite appreciated. This is a smart man who knows the current affairs. He knows that he can't fight, so he joins decisively. And once he makes up his mind, he makes a big move. The businessmen attending the meeting were also surprised by Arnold's generosity. Businessmen who had some doubts at first also immediately expressed their willingness to invest in joining, as if they were afraid that if they were slow, they would lose this golden opportunity. In fact, if you think about it, you will know that this new company will monopolize all foreign trade in the North. If any businessman does not join in, he will gradually be marginalized by the business community in the North. Very good, I'm amazed by everyone's enthusiasm. I think this Northern Foreign Trade Company that is about to be established will definitely achieve great success. Colin clapped his hands and smiled at Arnold. Okay, what I want to say is that's all. I'm sorry to disturb your party. I'll take my leave now and you can continue. After saying that, Colin strode out without any hesitation, only giving the Oliver brothers a look on the way. Brother Oliver immediately understood and stood up to say goodbye to everyone, chasing Colin's back and running out of the tavern. Only the envious businessmen were left. They all knew that the Oliver brothers would definitely hold important positions in the Northern Foreign Trade Company. Many people have begun to secretly plan to have a good relationship with the Oliver brothers, and maybe get some positions in the company in the future. Arnold looked at the absent-minded businessmen and suddenly felt a loss of interest. He stood stupidly in front of the stage, but no one looked at him at all, and no one asked whether the previously planned Northern Merchants Association was still established. Arnold drank all the red wine in the glass, sighed, and lowered his head, not knowing what he was thinking. The Original Vampire. Author, Ludo Busroot. Chapter 355. Under the bright moonlight, Colin left the Butter Tavern and returned to the Roaring Castle. The two Oliver brothers followed closely and walked into the castle's study. The three of them were seated separately, and the maid gently served them drinks and desserts before leaving quietly. Colin picked up the coffee and took a sip, then smiled at the slightly reserved two people. Now do you know why I'm looking for you? Oliver straightened his waist quickly, suppressed the excitement in his heart, and nodded. Yes, Lord Earl, I can probably guess something. Colin looked into Oliver's eyes and said solemnly, originally, I wanted to force you to become the president of the Northern Merchants Federation, but then I changed my mind. He has a better plan, so leave the Federation to Arnold. As for you, after the Northern Foreign Trade Company is officially established, the Duke will appoint you as the general manager of the company and be in charge of the company's daily operations. Although he had already made a guess in his mind, after receiving Colin's personal confirmation at this time, Oliver was so excited that he could hardly control himself. He clapped his chest loudly and expressed his determination to Colin. Thank you, Lord Earl, for your trust, I will definitely do it. I will work hard to manage this company for you and the St. Hilda family. Colin nodded with satisfaction and continued, I have already discussed it with Earl Umon. The Tulip Chamber of Commerce will all be merged into the new company, and all the Chamber of Commerce's assets will be converted into company shares, so that you can also occupy a seat on the board of directors. Yes, Oliver nodded in agreement, and of course he had no objection to this arrangement. Although he is the president of the Tulip Chamber of Commerce, this Chamber of Commerce is actually an asset of the Umon family, and Oliver is just a manager who is pushed to the forefront. The Tulip Chamber of Commerce is about to become history, but the glorious future of the Northern Foreign Trade Company is waiting for him, and Oliver certainly has no complaints. Your Majesty, there is a question I don't know whether to ask. After the initial excitement, Oliver spoke carefully. Colin seemed to see through Oliver's doubts and asked, are you worried about the board of directors? Yes, Oliver nodded repeatedly. Sir, Arnold has strong assets and a high reputation in the north. If he recruits a large number of businessmen into the company, will investing in our new company put the board of directors under his control? Colin glanced at Oliver and asked in a questioning tone, Arnold can win over other businessmen, can't you win over him? Don't tell me that your prestige is not as good as Arnold's. With my support, your appeal in the northern business community will never be lower than Arnold's. What's more, you also have the right to make suggestions for the new company's management team. Take advantage of this. Can definitely help you win over a large number of northern businessmen. If this allows Arnold to control the board of directors, then you deserve to be restricted by him in the future. After hearing this, Oliver quickly expressed his position loudly, Your Majesty, please rest assured, I will definitely make good use of the quota in the new company's management team to attract a group of powerful northern businessmen, and will never let the board of directors fall into the hands of Arnold. Colin's face softened slightly and he encouraged, do it with confidence and boldness, don't disappoint me. In fact, even if the funds Oliver raised were not as good as Arnold's, Colin could still find a way to protect him. The St. Hilda family, Angeli family, Schultz family, and the half-elf royal family Miller family can all provide financial support to Colin when he needs it. Moreover, Colin still has 2 war reparations in his hands, one from the Troll Empire and the other from the Minim family. This is a huge amount of more than 10 million gold coins. No Chamber of Commerce can allocate so much money at once. Funds. The Northern Foreign Trade Company is still in its infancy. Although many far-sighted businessmen can see its potential, their confidence is definitely not as strong as Colin's. Therefore, the businessmen's investment must not be too much, and Colin is confident enough to control the board of directors. Controlling the personnel rights of the company's management team and controlling the board of directors, this Northern Foreign Trade Company cannot escape from Colin's hands. Using this as a starting point, Colin can integrate and control the northern business community, and even use it as a special weapon for external expansion. That's right, Colin is ready to teach people in this world a lesson, letting them know that war is not just a form of military aggression, economic invasion is actually a method. It is more difficult to detect, but its destructive power is no less than that of a military invasion. After explaining to Oliver, Colin turned to look at Alma, who was sitting beside him. Alma caught Colin's gaze and quickly showed a flattering smile on her face. Colin also had arrangements for Oliver's brother, and said with a smile, Mr. Alma, I am planning to become a charitable foundation. I wonder if you are willing to help me manage it. Alma originally thought that he could take advantage of his younger brother and sneak into the Northern Foreign Trade Company to become an executive or something, but he didn't expect that Colin had other plans for him. Orma was just confused about what this charitable foundation was. Although she didn't understand, Alma would definitely not refuse Colin's request, and she immediately responded loudly, Of course, Sir Earl, if you have any requests, I am willing to serve you. Colin nodded with satisfaction, and remembered what his eyes became extremely deep. Very good. This charity foundation is not an organization with the purpose of profit, but its importance is by no means lower than that of the Northern Foreign Trade Company. Orma cheered up. He immediately asked, "Sir, what does this charitable foundation mainly do?" The wars in the North have been frequent in the past 2 years, creating a large number of people in need of assistance, such as farmers who have lost their fields, disabled veterans, the elderly without care, homeless children, etc. These people rely solely on the Guanghui Church. The rescue is not enough. That's why I want to set up this charity foundation to help these poor civilians. Sir, your kindness is more dazzling than the sun, Orma praised loudly, and then carefully he asked, but how should the source of funds for the charitable foundation be solved? The foundation accepts donations from anyone. Nobles, businessmen, and even surplus farmers can contribute to this. However, just relying on these donations are not enough, so the foundation needs to issue a welfare lottery. Welfare lottery, Olma repeated this new term, waiting for Colin's explanation. That's right. Colin picked up a piece of paper from the desk, handed it to Olma, and explained at the same time, "This is the sample of the welfare lottery. It is made of special paper and cannot be counterfeited. It has a series of numbers written on it. The price is 10 copper coins." Colin briefly explained the method of issuing lottery tickets, and the two brothers, who had been in the business world for many years, immediately realized the business opportunities contained therein. Alma praised with shining eyes, "Your Majesty the Earl, this is really a genius idea. I'm sure that the welfare lottery will become popular in the North and raise a lot of money for the charity foundation." Colin smiled lightly and was flattered by Orma. However, I believe that the two brothers in front of him would not understand the true meaning of his preparation of the charity foundation. His move was actually aimed at the Glory Church. Why does the church have such great appeal among the people? The chance to be baptized as a knight is too precious and has nothing to do with commoners. The promise of entering heaven after death is too elusive and cannot be seen or touched. As for the protection of gods, there have been no miracles in this world for thousands of years. The reason why the Glory Church has such a great influence among the people is that in addition to providing spiritual sustenance to the common people, there is another very important reason: charity. The church collects tithes, and in addition to being used to maintain the normal operation of the institution, most of the taxes are used to provide relief to the common people at the bottom. For civilians, this is a real benefit and the most important reason for them to believe in the Lord of Glory. In Colin's view, this is actually a welfare system, but this welfare system is actually controlled by the church. It is no wonder that the Lord's prestige among the lower class people makes it difficult to compete with the church. In order to support this welfare system, a large amount of money will definitely be needed. Given the current situation in the North, if taxes are rashly raised, public dissatisfaction will boil over. Of course, Colin will not be so unwise. That's why he came up with the idea of using lottery tickets to make money. Of course, the lottery is actually a kind of tax, IQ tax. When setting up a charitable foundation this time, Colin aimed to start with the foundation of the church and win the support of the people at the bottom. If the royal family wants to limit the power of the church when it comes to confronting the church, and Ajani and Mr. John want to start with "the gods are dead" and dismantle the source of the church's faith from top to bottom, then Colin B is prepared to start with charity relief and gradually erode the foundation of the church. In fact, Colin himself has no ill feelings about the existence of the church. He recognizes the Lord of Glory's protection for the human race, and feels that the people do need spiritual sustenance. However, he cannot stand the clergy using the name of the Lord of Glory for personal gain, let alone the fact that the Pope of Tolerance actually set his sights on Vera. Since he would have to face the church sooner or later, Colin wanted to prepare early. Moreover, establishing a welfare security system that can be controlled by himself is actually part of Colin's centralization plan. Yes, centralization. In Colin's view, the Lord and Fiefment system currently implemented by the Glorious Empire actually involves a great waste of efficiency, risks internal friction, and is far less convenient for governance than a centralized system. Of course, there are still many things needed to establish a centralized governance system. Colin is currently laying some foundations. Colin would definitely not talk about these things to the two businessmen, and even Vera would not know that Colin had such crazy ideas in his mind. Okay, you go prepare yourselves, tell me what you need. Yes, Your Majesty the Earl.